Welcome to the Return to Her podcast. I'm Cassie Dalton, yoga teacher, energy worker, and wellness coach. I'm here to help you come back home to your authentic self so you can live your most fulfilling, soul-inspired life. In this podcast, we'll explore practices from ancient wisdom traditions and insights from modern health and wellness science so that you can reconnect with yourself, body, mind, and spirit. We'll also hear from guests who are on their own spiritual journeys, and they'll share with us the lessons they've learned and the wisdom they've gained along the way. So if you feel like you've been gone from yourself for too long, now's the time to return to her. Welcome in, you beautiful divine souls. I just wanted to spend this episode letting you get to know me a little bit so that you can see where I've been, what I've gone through, and why I'm doing what I do now, which is working with women to help them come back home to their souls. So when I was a child, I was a highly anxious child. And I only recognize that now because when I see my daughter and the struggles that she's had with anxiety over the past few years, I realized that I probably had undiagnosed generalized anxiety disorder from as far back as I can remember. For example, my first actual memory, the thing that I think of as my first memory anyway, was a dream that I had. So my first memory was a dream where I was in my dad's car. And for some reason, I had a jar of sweet tea. I do live in Georgia. And in this dream, I accidentally spilled this jar of tea. And he got really upset with me. And honestly, I don't even think that he punished me other than he just got disappointed. And I woke up absolutely sobbing because I made such a huge mistake. So that was my first memory that I have of my childhood, that I made a mistake and it absolutely broke me apart. I also remember there were many days, many evenings when I was waiting for my mom to get home from work and I would look out my window, looking down to the bottom of the driveway, just waiting. Any car that I heard approaching, I thought, oh, that must be her. She's finally made it home. And then when they continue to drive by, I would get even more nervous, more anxious that she wasn't coming home, that something terrible must have happened. When it was dark outside and this happened, I would see headlights in the distance and I would listen and see if the car sounded like her car based on the headlights that I saw. I knew a car was approaching. Could it be her? It's not her. And then the cycle continued. And this was not just one time. This happened throughout my childhood. I don't think I ever told her that. It probably would have devastated her to know how anxious I was, how fearful I was. But those are just a couple of stories that demonstrate that I have a relationship with anxiety. It's been in my life for quite a while. I realized a few years ago that the same pattern has been continuing. It's been showing up in my life even today. I know how to recognize it sooner and shut it down, but it still comes up for me. For example, when my husband goes somewhere and then takes longer than I expect for him to come back home, especially if he's got one or both of our kids with him, then the same thing happens. I look outside the window. I stand in the living room just staring out at the driveway, or I sit on the front porch just listening for cars. I think, wow, okay, he's not home yet. Should I call him? Oh, but if I call him, is he going to look at his phone and then he's going to get in a wreck? Like that kind of thing. And it's just was such an unconscious pattern. I didn't even realize that it was the same thing over and over again. I catch it sooner. I realize sooner. It doesn't paralyze me as much as it used to. So definitely something that still I'm working with, but I've gotten a little bit better with it for sure through my practices. So of course I could tell a lot more stories like this. It's not really what this podcast is about. I was just giving you a little demonstration that I definitely know what anxiety feels like. I've had my share of it. And since I was a kid, I've always had this highly reactive stress response which actually is what motivates me so much now when I recognize that in other women, their anxiety or depression or stress that is burying their true selves. I see that and it makes me want to work even harder to help them overcome those challenges. Another thing that I've always dealt with, at least since puberty, was this debilitating on some days chronic fatigue. Some days it's good, some days it'll shut me down, even these days. And I only realized fairly recently, actually, that these particular challenges, this anxiety, those highly reactive stress response, chronic fatigue, these things were linked with a diagnosis that I got in high school of PCOS. If you don't know what PCOS is, it stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. It's an endocrine and a metabolic disorder that causes a lot of challenges for women, especially things like extra facial hair, challenges with maintaining a healthy weight, a predisposition to diabetes and cholesterol because your body doesn't metabolize things properly. Um, and, if all these complications weren't enough, one of the frequently overlooked symptoms of PCOS is this chronic fatigue that I had been experiencing and have continued to experience, to be honest, because the hormonal imbalances that are caused by this condition can lead to these persistent feelings of tiredness that affects your daily life. Your body just doesn't produce energy the same way that normal bodies do. And, it's just something that I've learned how to live with at this point. But it took me it took me a little while to get there. But anyway, I've been dealing with these anxiety and chronic fatigue symptoms for pretty much as long as I can remember. And going back to parts of my past to shine a light on who I am today and why I'm so freaking passionate about helping women, I do think that another thing to point out about myself, and I think a lot of you can probably relate, is this fun little personality feature that a lot of us have in common, the need to be perfect. And probably that stems from this fear of rejection that a lot of us have. So my perfectionism monster started to really rear its ugly head when I was in high school, and I became obsessed with being skinny because my ego told me that I wasn't good enough and that I would be rejected unless I looked like the women that I see on TV. Because of this obsession with body image, I developed eating disorders, and they ran my life for a while. And still, these disordered eating patterns can creep up on me even today when I'm not being vigilant, when I'm not paying attention. I also became obsessed with making all A's, like to the point of having panic attacks and stress eating, which didn't help with my already disordered eating patterns from my body image issues. So I finally graduated from high school and I had no idea what to major in. Like a lot of our high school students, you're kind of shoved into college or career tech and you're supposed to figure it out right at the onset. So the first thing I did was declared my major as psychology because what the hell else am I going to do? And then after a few psychology classes, which I loved, wanted to take some sociology classes. So that was going to be my major. And then I still had no idea how I was actually going to make a career because I didn't see either of these things as something that I wanted to do. But I remember I was always good at English in high school. My mom was a teacher. So, with no real sense of inspiration or enthusiasm, I chose to become an English major with a minor in secondary education so that I could become a teacher. I continued to obsess over my grades through college, and I used to be hella proud to say that I graduated with my bachelor's degree while maintaining a 4.0. I never made a single B. Actually, I did make on one college paper a B plus, and that absolutely devastated me. But fortunately, I was able to make good enough grades on the other papers that my average was an A. I also remember one time I argued with one of my professors, why did I get one of my points deducted? I had a 99 on a project that I did instead of a 100. And the rest of my fellow classmates thought that I was insane. How could I possibly argue over that 1 point? I still made a 99. But to me, that really mattered. Now, when I look back on it, I see all of the stress that I created for myself, all of the strain that that obsession with making all A's put on my relationships. and I'm not so proud of it. It's a little cringeworthy. Like, I thought I needed a 4.0 to be impressive so that people would think that I was smart. But really, what it was that I wanted to feel on the inside like I was good enough. And that really didn't even do it. It just made this problem of not good enough even worse. While I was in college, though, I worked at Curves. Some of you might remember back in the day. I'm not sure if they're actually even still around, but they were really popular for women. It was a fitness facility slash program designed just for women. Only women could attend. And I loved that job so much because I got to demonstrate the exercise equipment. I got to keep company with the women while they worked out. I got to help them create goals and hold them accountable to their goals, and it was a lot of fun. Actually, I felt like I was more passionate about that than I ever was about becoming an English teacher. It didn't quite occur to me at that time, though, that that's actually what I wanted to do with my life, what my soul was nudging me toward, until pretty much right before I was finished with my degree requirements so that I could become an English teacher. The owner of the Curves where I worked wanted all of us to attend a Curves convention in downtown Atlanta. And I remember when I was there, I just kept looking around and even told one of my coworkers, gosh, I don't want to be an English teacher. I want to do this stuff for the rest of my life. And I was so genuine about that. But I remember seeing a little look on her face like, no, this isn't what you need to be doing. Finish your degree, be a teacher, forget about this. Are you crazy? You've worked so hard to get your degree. Like, she didn't actually say any of those things, but that's how I felt. That's what I interpreted based on her expression. Who knows? Maybe that was just a little bit of projection there. But because of that, I quickly shut that down. Thinking back on it, I remember that moment as one of the most painful times that I ignored the whisper of my soul. And it breaks my heart a little bit to think of it. Even though things are great now, everything turned out in a beautiful way in my life. I had an opportunity to listen to my soul way back then in my early 20s, and I ignored her. I shut her down. So I became a teacher. After I graduated with a 4.0, I landed a job at my former high school, which was really great. It was just down the road from my house. And I knew a lot of the teachers there. They used to be my teachers, and now they were my colleagues, which was really awesome and also intimidating. But as I stepped into that career, I I will say for sure, even though I really cared about the students who came in front of me, I could not care less about teaching the content, and I despised grading papers and projects. The only unit that actually excited me every year was Transcendentalism, with Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, all about becoming one with nature and rejecting society's values and following the beat of your own drummer, connecting with the oneness of God, the oversoul. I could have literally taught that unit for the full year of American literature if I was allowed. So every time it came around, I would get really hyped up and I loved it and I came alive. And every time the unit ended, I would just go back to going through the motions, basically. I knew in the middle of year 2, actually, that I didn't want to be a high school teacher when I realized I was using my planning period to actively research careers that you can do with an English major other than teaching. But I dutifully kept going because it was the responsible thing to do, and frankly, I didn't have the energy to reinvent my life. I had invested too much in this identity, this education, and like I said before, I was already running on a lower energy tank than most people because of the PCOS challenges. So, about year 5 into my teaching career, my health really started to tank. I was fortunately able to have 2 kids, which I know a lot of women with PCOS aren't able to do because of fertility challenges. So, I do thank God every day for removing that particular obstacle from my path because those kids are everything to me. But I was so tired by the end of the workday that I couldn't even be present with them. And that was painful to my heart. On top of the fatigue, I was having panic attacks, migraines. developing one infection after another, being prescribed one round of antibiotics after another, developing food intolerances, which I now know stemmed from the antibiotics that were wiping out my gut microbiome. And I remember one night at the end of a concert that I attended with some of my colleagues, they had to literally drive me to the ER because I was covered head to toe with hives from an allergic reaction to the antibiotics that I had been given to treat yet another infection. I also developed shingles at the age of 30, which was originally misdiagnosed because I was so young. And guess what? Because I was misdiagnosed, they thought it was an infection and they prescribed me antibiotics. So I could probably say more about all that, but I think you get the point. I do understand now that there was a saving grace in everything. I truly believe that I had to go through all of these crazy challenges because they were the breadcrumbs on my path that led me to where I am now. And I'm so thankful for where I am now. In the multi-year search to figure out what the hell was wrong with me health-wise, I went to a chiropractor. Sure, my neck could be responsible for all these things. Why not? At least it could be partially responsible, so I gave it a chance. But in the process of receiving treatments for my neck, I saw a sign-up sheet for a yoga class that a local teacher was holding in the office after hours every Tuesday night. I asked the chiropractor if that was something that I should do. Would it help my neck? Would it help my health challenges? And he said, yes, absolutely. It would probably help a lot. So I decided to sign up. I had never done yoga before, and even now, I'm really amazed at how brave I was to go to that first class because it was definitely new to me and it put me way outside my comfort zone. And I had zero energy to even get through my day, much less come back to do physical activity at night. So honestly, it was a godsend that this class appeared in front of me and that my soul gave me enough courage to follow through with it. At the end of this first yoga class, first of all, two things happened. I At the end of class, after Shavasana, and everybody sits back up and gets ready to close the class down, what Peggy did, she had this beautiful singing voice. She was a trained opera singer, I think. And she sang this beautiful little closing. I would try, I can't do it justice, but her words were, the light in me sees the light in you. I bow to you. You bow to me. Namaste. And the next day, I remember driving to work as I was going around a curve, just same road I've driven every day. But I had this flash of her singing this song, and I started to sing it out loud, just remembering her singing it last night. And that was the first time that I really thought about, wow, I do have this light in me. Everybody does. We're all connected. We're all part of God. I recognize the truth of that. I'd had these words before. I'd heard this language before, but I recognized on a deep level the truth of that. And that really shifted something for me. And another thing that she did at the end of class, or maybe it was like during Shavasana when we were relaxing and getting comfortable, I remember her saying, let go of what no longer serves. So I knew that things needed to change in my life. I knew that I had a light in me that was guiding my steps. But what happens a lot of times is we have these moments of realization and we wake up just for a brief moment to the truth of our soul, truth of God, and then we go back to sleep. And that's what happened for me. So it still took me several years after that first class with her, which I continued to take classes with her. So these messages continue to get reinforced, thankfully. But it took me several years before I actually put these messages into practice in my life. So I remember about 3/4 of the way through my final year of teaching high school before I retired. I say that I retired. I didn't actually retire. I only made it a decade. But I left that job. And it was about 3/4 of the way through my final year of teaching. when I remember vividly sitting in a meeting full of other American literature teachers in my department, and we were co-collaborating, trying to come up with our final unit and kind of preparing for the year ahead, since, the school year was winding down. And I just had a wave of stillness, of silence. Everything around me just went quiet, even though in the midst of their conversation, I could see people talking. I could tell people were talking, but everything just went quiet. And I felt more than I heard my inner voice say that this job is not serving me anymore. I do not want to do this any longer. And that moment was so powerful that I didn't say a word for the rest of the meeting. I had pretty much checked out at that point. Wasn't trying to be rude to anybody, but I just couldn't. I could not engage anymore. So at the end of that meeting, I quietly got up and I left the room. I went home that day. I opened up the budget spreadsheet that my husband and I had on our computer. I looked through desperately hoping that there was a way that we could afford for me to have no income for at least a couple of years so that I could leave that job and figure out what I really wanted to do. Maybe I just wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and that was going to be okay because I had kids that were in this preschool age and they're so precious. And I don't have any energy to hang out with them or to spend time with them the way that I wanted to. So maybe that was all I was going to do. Can we do that? Maybe I could become a personal trainer where I work part time. Or, hey, maybe I could become, and this was my little soul whispering to me, a yoga teacher, since yoga is the reason that I was finally brave enough to consider letting go of things that no longer served. So it took me several weeks of running the numbers, analyzing this and that, seeing what we could shift, what payments we could get rid of, how could this possibly work? And finally, God showed me the way. And as our contracts for the next year came out for us to sign, instead of signing the contract, I tearfully wrote a resignation letter and I delivered that. And it was so painful. And I realize now that it was not painful because I was saying goodbye to my friends. We had each other's numbers. We could keep in touch if we wanted to. It was really painful. And more than painful, it was scary as hell because I was really saying goodbye to the identity that I had created over the past decade, the only identity that I'd had as an adult. And that was the best thing that I've ever done for myself because it was 100% what my soul was telling me had to happen so that I could live my authentic, soul-driven life. And not too long after stepping away from teaching, I decided, yeah, I think I do want to be a yoga teacher. Well, at least see how that goes. So I enrolled in a 200-hour yoga teacher training program with a teacher that I'd never met before, and her studio was over an hour away. But that was the only thing that I could find that really called to my soul. I went through that program and loved it. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, at least in part. After I finished my 200-hour yoga teacher training, I knew that I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to keep going back. So my teacher also offered a 300-hour training. And if you're not in the world of yoga teacher training, let me just break it down. So the 200-hour training is what most yoga teachers that they'll have had that training to become a yoga teacher. And that's all that's required. But for those that really want to go into depth in different aspects of yoga, different modalities, or workshops that help you get better at teaching seniors, workshops that help you learn how to do hands-on adjustments, workshops that help you learn how to teach yin yoga or restorative yoga. So there's a lot of different workshops involved in that 300-hour teacher training that some yoga teachers will continue on with. And that's what I wanted to do because I didn't just want to be okay at teaching yoga. I really wanted to go all in. After I had finished my certification, I reconnected with my first yoga teacher because she had started to offer classes at a church that was maybe like 30 minutes away from me. And I wanted to see her again, and I wanted to take a yoga class with her since I hadn't experienced her and her style in so long. So when I went to that yoga class, she talked about how she doesn't only do yoga, she also does Reiki. And that kind of piqued my interest. Like I'd just been studying yoga, talking about the chakras. And now here is someone who does yoga and Reiki, which is another way at helping balance chakras, helping people connect with themselves and live in alignment with their souls. And I thought that that was really cool. So I scheduled an appointment so that I could have a Reiki session with her. And my first Reiki experience was amazing. I I don't want to give too many details away because it was so personal, it was so touching, and I knew at the end of my session that 100% God was real. There's just something about Reiki, to me anyway, that lifts the veil from this reality. I guess I can say it lifts the veil of the illusion so that you can actually perceive the reality for a moment. And that reality to me was the reality of God. So after that experience, I never again questioned whether God was real or just a figment of my imagination. I saw angels in the clouds. I was getting and recognizing messages from my soul that were continuing to guide me. And it was revolutionary. It was life-changing. So because of that, I decided, you know what? This teacher, she does yoga and she also practices Reiki. So why can't I do that? I enrolled in her Reiki training so that I could learn self-care techniques and also learn how to provide Reiki for other people, which is what I do now. In addition to teaching yoga, I also do hands-on Reiki, distance Reiki, and other energy healing techniques that I've learned along the way. So that was a really great moment for me. And because I was on this yoga path, and also because I had experienced the benefits of energy healing, I was open to the possibility when my yoga teacher said that she was creating a journey to India. And wow, going to India for the first time was so amazing. My yoga teacher teamed up with a spiritual teacher from a different path, a different energy healing tradition than Reiki. And their mission was to take a group of women to go a little bit more in depth in their yoga practice while also going to really powerful energy spots. So, like different temples, different areas where divine energy is really strong. And in India, there is a lot of beautiful divine energy to tap into. So I went on this journey with my yoga teacher and this other spiritual teacher who became my teacher after I met him. Studied with him for these past several years, just learning meditation, deepening my spiritual practices, and learning how to use energy in different ways to help heal myself and to help heal others. I went back to India a second time with this particular teacher, stayed in an ashram in southern India for a couple of weeks, and also ventured out to explore different power spots that we hadn't been to in the first trip. So, with all of these things combined, I'm a yoga teacher because I've been able to deepen my own meditation practice with my spiritual teacher. I also teach meditation. I practice Reiki and other energy healing techniques, both for myself and for clients. And I knew that that wasn't quite enough, though, because I really wanted to be able to work with women specifically. I'll work with anybody, let's just be clear. But my calling is women. And I wanted to be able to help them more than just teaching them a few yoga poses and balance their chakras. So I decided to enroll in a health and wellness coaching program from Mind Body Green so that I could hone my coaching skills so that not only am I helping women who want to invite more movement into their bodies, who want to learn how to meditate, who wanted to get their energy balanced so that they can live with a little bit more alignment. But now I am helping women who want to create goals for their health, for their wellness that might relate to their physical activity. It might relate to their nutrition. It could relate to creating their own spiritual practice or getting more connected in their faith. Whatever it is, that final little piece, the health and wellness coaching, has helped me to create more offerings that I know can really help women. So, throughout my journey from anxiety and panic attacks and chronic fatigue, realizing that I have some blood sugar regulation problems related to PCOS, high cholesterol. I've got a lot of things to work with, but because of all of these different challenges that I've had, and of course I'll continue to have, we're human in human bodies. Well, we're souls in human bodies, but because of that human aspect, we will have challenges. We will have to work through them no matter what. It's kind of like whack-a-mole, you work on one, another one comes up, and that's fine. It's a new opportunity. It's a new lesson. But because of all of these challenges, that took me on a path away from a career that wasn't really serving my soul, and it brought me into what my soul was actually calling me to do. I've been able to meet so many teachers. I've developed so many friendships along the way. I've lost some friendships who were simply no longer resonant with who I am, with who I'm becoming, and that's okay. I've learned that that's part of the path. And I've also learned that your vibe really does attract your tribe. That's true. And I have a big tribe that's constantly expanding. I have been able to learn so many practices, both related to ancient wisdom traditions that I've studied, as well as modern health and wellness science. And through it all, just really becoming more aware of my soul's guidance, its voice, so that when it whispers, I respond more quickly instead of waiting until it starts to scream. That's really what it does. If we ignore it, it will start to get louder. It will start to create more things in our life that we think, oh, our life is falling apart. But no, that's really our soul pushing us to that boiling point where we have to make a decision. We have to make a change. That's really what I think happened to me in my journey. And I do recognize now that every little part of my journey has brought me closer to my soul and has brought me closer in my relationship with God. And I'm so thankful for it all. Each day I have more opportunities to learn and grow, to do the practices that nurture my body and mind so that I can recognize and connect with my soul, because I think that's really what it's all about. I don't always listen, and it's always going to be a work in progress, but I am actively walking this path and surrendering to what my soul is asking of me next, most of the time. And honestly, that's why I'm here doing this podcast, which I never would have thought in a million years I would want to do because I'm super introverted. But here we are. My soul is asking me to put my voice and my story out there to help others. And I finally said, okay, I'll do that, even though it's terrifying. So I'm here to share these practices, the wisdom teachings that I've learned, and to have conversations with others that are on their own path, but paths that are similar, leading back to our souls. I'm so honored to do this work and to share what I've learned and will keep learning. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. It really feels good to go through my story so that you can know a little bit about my past and what led me to this point in my journey. And also, I'm recognizing it's just a story. Now that I've put it out there, I'm not bound to it any longer, no more than you're bound to yours. So we can work together to write new stories moving forward, stories guided by our souls and our connection with the divine, however you relate to that. We have a long way to go to get back home, but we can have fun and love and laughter along the way. As Ram Dass famously quoted his guru Maharaji, we're all just walking each other home. And I'm really excited and honored to walk with you. I'll see you next time. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining me in the Return to Her podcast. That was so much fun. I hope that you got something good from it, and I look forward to next week where we will dive into some of the practices that I have been implementing in my life and that I share with my clients. I hope that I see you there. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single thing, and I'll see you next time.